I want to build a test of this method. This uses a proxy contract that's deployed to a particular address, and whenever there's changes to this particular contract, this address gets updated. So the address is stored as a constant in my implementation. But I want to make sure that I get this called properly whenever I'm using it. So I'm going to show you how in Foundry to solve that problem, to implement this test. Okay, so I've taken the liberty of setting up the skeleton for the test, so let's go ahead and start implementing it. All right, and we can create a simple example so that if we run it, we know it's going to be working. And I've disabled func name mix case because this format doesn't agree here, which is commonly a convention that's used in Foundry tests. I use this elsewhere in my code, but for tests I can disable it. So what do we need to do? So first we need to import that particular address. From that script that we were just looking at. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then what I'm going to want to do is going to mock that address. So okay, so I'll clear mock calls. And then I need to have an implementation of that community in order for me to call it. So let's get the community builder from the original source repository so that we can create it and mock it. Collective governance community builder is what we're going to be using. Okay, and then what I want to do, because when I call the mocks may not succeed if there's no code backing it up because of inserting particular instructions by the VM when it runs when these functions are generated. So I'm just going to establish the code using the VM etch command. And my address, remember, is stored at this constant called community builder, and we're just going to set that code. Okay, and now we're ready to begin mocking, basically. We have code there, and let's just set up something very simple. So on community builder, and if I bring up that particular contract, you can see, the simple interface. But basically, it's a builder style pattern, a community as a certain type of community. So with these things, and then eventually, after setting it all up, it allows you to build it. So we want to mock up this kind of behavior. So you can see that I'm using Copilot. So let's see how closely Copilot got to something reasonable. So what I want to do is call this. So build community has an ERC20 community, the quorum, any number will do, and a supervisor, and then we're going to build. So let's see. So it's calling as ERC20 community, and it's expecting the value of token. It calls the with community supervisor and with the build. So that all looks really good. Now, of course, I haven't mocked all these methods, so I expect this currently to fail. So let's set up the rest of these mocks. What I'm doing here is mocking a call on that particular address. I use the ABI encode with selector to select the appropriate selector for the function that I'm mocking. And I just noticed that mock impl is calling the instance, but I actually want to call the contract for the selector, just to be more general. There's the build selector, so I know that that's required. And in each case, I want to return the community builder itself. That's what that last part is. And I'm also going to need an instance to return when it's successfully built. So I'm just going to return a particular address, and then I can check that that address is correct in the test below. Since it's a mock, I don't have to return a valid implementation. Then I need to implement all the other methods that I'm going to call. So this here you can see is the return value. So in each case I want the builder method to return the builder itself. You can see that the test failed here when I ran it. So we need with quorum as ERC 721 ERC20 community. With community supervisor. All right. So now each of the methods has been mocked. And then one thing here, I actually set up a return address of 10. So let's just make sure that the community address is returned as 10. And now what happens when we run our tests? Okay, so you can see that the build community test passed. So what did I do? Okay, so I got an implementation of my actual code. I got the code for that contract and I etched it using the etch cheat code on the VM for Foundry. Then I implemented each of the methods that I want to call on that address, and this is the address. And then all I had to do was call the implementation that depends on those calls at a particular address, and I'm able to use the expect call, which says that this must be called or the test should fail for each of the functions and on the contract that I'm actually going to use. And I can see I'm missing an expect here. So let me just get that one. Okay, and so that's all. That's all that it takes to mock the implementation of a contract at a particular address using Foundry and Solidity.